But it did go into his time.
How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm Mike, by the way.
Ethan.
I'm officially Matt. I see your name pop up on emails, but that's about it.
Yeah.
Welcome,
Cool.
everyone.
So you work with Jim?
To start
Yeah, he's
the
right
July
there.
19th
Summer.
Economic
Awesome.
Growth and Development
Cool.
Committee meeting.
What are you doing?
I'm going
for
to call
grad
it
school?
the
We are
meeting to
massive
order
about
and ask for approval of minutes. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting? Edna and Supervisor McDevitt, thank you very much. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
It's approved. Moving forward, Liza, talk about employment and training and workforce development.
Go to the podium in case there's anybody.
That's
chimes
perfect.
in
Thank
on-
you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. I only have two resolutions today. The first one is to approve the Workforce Development Board budget. And I'll explain more once that's on the floor.
Do a motion to bring this before Supervisor Leggett. Thank you. Second, Supervisor McGowan. Thank you.
Thank you. So in the multi-jurisdictional agreement, which you have just for reference, our federal grant WIOA requires that we fund our local workforce development board budget. So you have the budget that the Workforce Development Board approved in their last meeting. And we do see an increase of about 10% compared to last year. You'll see in the resolution that this is just to approve their budget, and part of my budget, of course, goes to paying for their budget. But I'm happy to answer any questions.
Supervisor Leggett.
Thank you. Liza, this is put together by the board, the 3 counties all together, correct? And it's more than doubled in the past 2 years.
Yes.
Can you explain?
Sure. So originally, under the previous executive director of the board, it was a part-time position. And that wasn't enough time to get all the work that needed done. So under the new executive director, Ms. Gretchen Steffen, it is a full-time position. And that also is now a Saratoga County position with full benefits. And that's part of why the costs have gone up for the board. But there's other things that they haven't had to spend much money on, of course, with travel in the past 2 years, where we were able to save some money. But membership costs are going up. And everything else. And so that's part of the reason for the 10% increase this year. But just the role shifting in the last couple years is why it doubled for the salary.
Supervisor McGowan.
Yes, thank you. You have this budgeted, this 10%?
Yes.
Any other questions? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Liza?
Thank you. The second resolution request is to amend our contract with New York Wired. That is the online training platform metrics that we use. It's the one we use with the county as well for the leadership training and diversity training. We are amending this contract to include certification costs. We're now able to cover if somebody wants to get Microsoft Office certification or project management certification, we are able to cover those costs through metrics, through those training programs. And so this new updated contract includes the option of adding $5,000 increments at any point in time to help our local residents or county employees gain additional credentials.
Have a motion to bring this to the floor, please. Supervisor McDevitt, a second. Supervisor Leggett. Any questions? Supervisor Leggett.
Thanks, Chairman. The 37,477.50 is for all 3 years. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And this is, as you just mentioned, it's open to the certification. It's open to
Any Warren County resident or business.
right? And that's you getting that advertised out in that larger advertising budget that was just approved.
Yes, we will, after this new contract is approved, then we will start to advertise more that these certification options are available. But the regular other thousands of courses on metrics, we have been advertising that a lot because it's part of the PUSH program, the hospitality training program, et cetera.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If you have one for Liza. Liza, if you could give us an update on what you're going to do with that $500,000 you got from ARPA.
Yes, do you mind if I share that in my other general
You're
updates?
more than welcome to
Okay.
do that.
But I did want the committee to know that for the $5,000, I asked Metrics or New York Wired, can we carry that over, right, if we don't use it? They said we could carry it over up to 1 year, which is great. So we don't lose it, the investment for the $5,000 increments.
Any other questions? Then I'll call the questions. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That is carried also. Liza?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I just wanted to share some other general employment updates, and I'm happy to talk about the ARPA money. So we are still at 3% unemployment rate. Places are very busy. As you can see, there are still a lot of job openings. We're grateful to have J1s this year. We're grateful to have more youth workers this summer. And teenagers continue to take advantage of all the employment opportunities, which is wonderful. But we do know that we need to continue to recruit anybody who's on the sidelines, whether that's active seniors, people with disabilities, veterans, people with criminal convictions, things like that. So a lot of our work and intentions are focused around the populations that are on the sidelines, since our unemployment rate still remains very low. I shared with Supervisor Hogan and this committee last year that I would love to see us doing a fall celebration of our summer tourism workers, and then it being a soft handoff to winter employers, right? So we can move people from one seasonal job to another seasonal job. So I have some ideas in the works around that, and I'll be talking to Six Flags and other major tourism leaders in our community about how we can go about starting that. And my hope and prayer is that we can still do that this fall. So I will keep you guys posted on that. Regarding the ARPA money, which I am so grateful for, and I've worked with Don Lehman on creating a press release about it so our community knows where that $500,000 is going. $85,000 is for training. With our WIOA training dollars, sometimes it's very restricted to somebody who's underemployed or unemployed. And we want businesses to have an opportunity at training dollars to upskill their workers and retain them. And we also want people who are already employed, right, to have the opportunity for additional training. We know that that helps with worker retention and worker morale when people feel like their employers invested in them. So $85,000 will be for training. $8,000 is for workforce transportation. I already have 100 bike and bus passes to distribute to businesses for local Warren County residents who use public transportation to go to work. So we'll, especially right now with gas prices so high, we'll be distributing those passes this week and next week now that that was passed in last Friday's board meeting. There was over $200,000, I believe it was $250 for a new employee who will be working with the school districts and BOCES and labor unions to make sure that we are building intentional programs and services as a pipeline for our young people to get into our local industries. So at next month's committee meeting, I'll be bringing before you the intent to fill that position and to add and fill that position. CSEA and HR are working, civil service and HR are working on the job description that I'll have to share with you next month. What else? We had 120,000 flexible dollars because we don't know what impacts an impending recession may have on our workforce. So I was grateful to Supervisor Dickinson for encouraging the ARPA committee to give us that flexibility with those dollars. We know the ARPA committee wants to see plans and programs and proposals for ARPA dollars, but we also know that a lot can change in the next 4 to 6 years, or 4 years, excuse me, during the 6-year sunset of ARPA. What else did I miss, Chairman Wild, for the ARPA money? Transportation, flexible spending, new position. Oh, we hired a job coach to help with our summer workers, which has been incredible. We were lucky to get a teacher's assistant from Glens Falls Middle School, and she is doing phenomenal work with our youth who need additional assistance during this summer's summer youth employment program. We have several youth with individualized education plans who need one-on-one assistance, and my current staff was not able to meet all those needs. So I'm grateful that we have that job coach this summer, and hopefully we can extend that for future summers. That's the gist of ARPA, although I may be forgetting something, but you will see that in a press release, if not today, tomorrow, but I'm happy to answer any other questions about ARPA.
Wayne,
Yeah, did you initiate the program with the library on the iPads and or whatever?
Thank you for that. That's for the $30,000 of ARPA money. Thank you, Wayne, for that reminder. Mike Colvin is going to be ordering the technology devices that we put together to fulfill that $30,000 budget. It is for laptops and iPads. Some of them will be for short-term rentals out of my department, the Career Center, and then longer-term rentals for educational or vocational purposes would be out of Crandall Library. We are drafting an agreement together, but we need to know when our technology devices arrive so that then we can have an agreement that matches the time frame for that. The folks who check out those devices will also sign an agreement. In addition to that, that 30,000 technology funds will cover new smart TVs for our Career Center, for our workshops and our computer lab, as well as a Wi-Fi printer. If anybody from the community needs to print their resume or a job application from their phone, they can print it to our office.
any questions, comments? Next on the agenda, Liza?
So thank you, Mr. Chairman and the committee. I just want to revisit, and you have on the last page of your packet, I just want to revisit the conversation that we had last month as well, just about the large percentage of my federal budget that goes towards Fringe. So you can see is $194,000 that goes towards Fringe. And this is from our program year 21 budget, just for your reference. And that also includes, you know, the cost of retirees, right? So our budget is currently paying for 9 retirees, and 7 of them did not work under this grant. So I want to just keep reiterating that money could be going to other programs and services for our community, for our residents, if we did not have to use our budget for that. We also use our own budget for our own salary raises. So I've given you 3 options to consider and for discussion to think about investing in workforce development, not only for our county, but also for our county workers. I in my 3 years here, I've seen that we still have some gaps in workforce development for our own employees. And I would love to be able to do more work with HR, with civil service, with department heads to make sure that we are upskilling and retaining our own county workers. So you can see at the bottom of the document, I've given you 3 options to consider in funding for our department. So the first option is a minimum contribution of $50,000 to help offset some fringe costs. The second option is $50,000 to $200,000, which helps cover fringe costs and also allows us to do work beyond our WIOA grant requirements. We're currently doing a lot of work beyond our WIOA grant requirements, but we are not compensated for that, nor are we measured for that, nor do we have to report those things formally. But we know that our community and our economy relies on our work beyond the federal grant. And we know that a lot of times legislation doesn't meet today's circumstances, right? So that's the second option. And then the third option is a more substantial investment, either between $200,000 and $500,000 to cover fringe costs, and then to invest in additional programs, positions, and opportunities to address the short and long-term needs of our local economy, as well as our county worker needs. This is not a resolution request. This is just for discussion for the committee today, especially as we're starting to go into budget season this fall. Happy to answer any questions.
So the reason I brought up ARPA is because they're more project related, right? Liza, I don't think we can use those for any salaries and the like, right? So we have some funds from ARPA that can help us expand some of our programs, but it's only a 4-year kind of supplement. So it's maybe 125,000, not even that, that goes towards this. So what I'd like the committee to consider is, where do we think we need to go with workforce? And the support that we might be able to get from this committee and maybe from budget, even though I know everybody's got their hands out right now, to what kind of focus do we need to bring to our workforce? Liza has been very successful in integrating with the tourism industry and some of our other industries, but there's so much more we can do. So the kind of question before the committee is, do we feel like we need to be expanding our efforts? And if so, how do we approach that in the economic climate that we have today? Supervisor Leggett.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just to give this discussion some context, what is the contribution directly out of Warren County to your office? Is it above and beyond your real grants?
It's zero. Warren County does not contribute anything right now towards workforce development.
It's all covered then by that grant.
And that's why the fringe is a big part of it. Well, let's say a portion of it. No takers, no comments?
Thinkers.
But where would we grab the money?
Pardon me?
Where would the money come from?
Well, we can pass a hat. Right, but no, it's more of a long-term plan in terms of where we want to go, right?
Budget thing.
And obviously, with the ARPA money, there are some proof of concept kind of things that, from what I expect, Liza will be able to take some of this money and do some proof of concept to say we need to do even more of this. So it may not be something that we do today. I think as a minimum, we should do the 50,000 contribution. If I can get the budget officer to kind of go along with that. But I think we need to do more. And like I mentioned, she has had the reputation of being able to get things done. And with 3% unemployment, we still have needs. With an impending recession, we will continue to have needs, different needs, right, in terms of how to address the challenges that come along with that.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, Liza, please.
I just want to add, I'm really trying to be proactive, as we talked about last month as well, and many of you were at the EDC forum or EDC luncheon last month, that with our aging population, the workforce shortage is unfortunately here to stay, right? So it is imperative that we have intentional programs of outreach with our school systems to keep young people here and to connect them to our local business community. So these challenges we've been facing during the pandemic are not going away, and we are going to continue to have a shortage. And with baby boomers retiring at record rates, as we're calling the silver tsunami, we have to engage young people now and be proactive instead of being reactive or responsive later when it could be too late. And then one other thing I'll leave you with is that, all of you know that our county revenue is dependent on our tourism industry. And we're doing a lot to support our tourism and hospitality industry so that we can continue to have that revenue that provides valuable services to our community. So without our workforce and our tourism workforce specifically, we would see our county revenue go down. So this is the other reason we're trying to get ahead of these issues around workforce and build some programs and positions and utilize our funding more effectively to address the long-term needs of our economy and our workforce here in Warren County.
So we all know that there's like this three-legged stool that we're fighting with. You know, we have workforce issues, we have transportation issues, and we have housing issues, right? And one of the biggest challenges that we have coming up is school enrollment is down. We have, and Jim Zipline has talked about this before, the number of let's say, bodies in residences, the average has gone down. So it's more seniors, less families. Short-term rentals are having an impact on that also because there's no housing stock for our workforce to be part of. So these are big challenges. You know, obviously we've invested in some work on housing. We're working on trying to get, and hopefully the planning group will talk about that a little bit. Transportation, we know that CDTA merger is something that that is in the works. We're just waiting for the mayor to give us some updates. And workforce. I think those are the three big challenges that impact our local economy. So should we put this on hold? Should we have some more thoughts going forward, more information for the committee? No one wants to commit. Supervisor Leggett.
Yeah, thinking through process, we are heading into budget season. So if this committee was to put something forward to be considered for the upcoming budget, then would need to happen in the next several months.
That's a good suggestion. So we'll keep it on the agenda. Keep it moving forward. Mr. Sibline.
I know, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know I'm not a committee member, but I would offer, Liza knows this already, but I want the committee to know any data that we could provide that would help steer that investment and help you evaluate return on different scenarios, we would be happy to do. So for example, after tourism, it's either the second or third largest segment of our workforce is associated with healthcare. And understanding what the costs are right now of both those openings and the transitory portion of that workforce. There's more than 100 visiting nurses, for instance, right now at Glens Falls Hospital. If those nurses existed in our community permanently, what would the economic impact be? And what would it take for us to be able to create the opportunity to train more of our current population to be capable of doing that work? That's an example of the kind of analysis we could help her with that would help steer what the return on this kind of investment would be. So we're always here to help in an integrative way, whether it's directly with the committee or with Liza.
Thank you, Jim. We're good? Supervisor Lowe. Ryan.
I just wanted to register agreement with the chair that minimally we should do something here.
Yes.
And I think it would be very helpful for the future of this department and our workforce needs to do more than the minimal.
Would also like to mention, thank you for bringing this before us now from the EDC luncheon. It's very clear what our future is looking like. This would be proactive on addressing these issues.
So we're going to keep this on the agenda. No decision today. Sorry, Liza. No decision today, but we'll talk about it again next month.
It's fine. Thank you for the
Anything
time.
else that you'd like to bring up?
Lastly, I just want to wish Administrator Moore a very happy birthday. And glad you were born, and that in my first 3 years of working here that I've been able to work for you and with you. It's been a privilege. So thank you, and I wish you well.
Likewise, Liza, I'm so proud that we were able to recruit you and keep you and the work that you've done. You've been great to work with.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank
You're
you.
welcome, and no comment about
So-
Administrator Moore. He's leaving us,
Tammy's
and
birthday
I'm not too
yesterday.
happy.
Tammy's birthday yesterday, Ryan's today. Oh, my gosh.
Sarah tomorrow.
I was there tomorrow. Oh, my gosh. So, hey, happy
The
birthday.
trifecta.
Wow.
So Jim, would you mind giving the committee an update?
Sure. Got some charts here. You can pull those up, but not here's the picture for you. Whichever one you put up, I'll be happy to work with. Go in any order. Yourself. Couple couple of things while we're pulling that up. I want to introduce Mike Schrammel, who I brought with me. Mike is an example of the do as we say and not just or do as, we're trying to model the right behavior. He's a intern working with us this summer. He's an intern who worked with me before at Just Water, and I managed to convince him that there was even better work to be done at the EDC. But he's an example of exactly what we're after here. Mike is a proud graduate of Glens Falls High School. His family is well known in the area. His dad's the fire chief in Glens Falls. But he could go anywhere. He's in the process of getting a graduate degree in applied economics from Johns Hopkins. I mean, that's as good as it gets. He's a son of this area. We've got to fight to keep the Mike Schrammels of the world. So we're doing everything we can in the EDC. We're giving him compelling work. We're trying to give him a glimpse of what the community needs, and we want him to know we love him and need him. I invited him here so he could feel some of that love from some others. But this is the work that we must all be engaged in. The value that he delivers will be obvious in some of the stuff that I share with you. So an example of this I put up on the screen is recent data that was just released yesterday from CEG. And it talks about business formation in the state. The first thing to understand is the capital region is the single biggest driver of business creation in the state of New York. There are 10 regions in New York that are divided in economic development sectors. The capital region has created the most new business activity by registrations of EINs. Now, to some degree, I'll let you in on a little secret here. Albany always has an inside advantage on this, because if you're starting a company and you don't necessarily want to tell people where it is in the state of New York, you rent a post office box in Albany and you put it there. So there's some number of these that from the capital district are just a function of somebody picking an address in the state capital. But what's interesting about this is in the #1 region of the state in terms of business creation, the #2 county in terms of this is Warren County. In fact, we are essentially in the top 10 in the state of New York, nowhere near the top 10 in terms of population or pretty much any other economic piece of data. And yet we punch way, way above our weight. So Warren County created 625 net new entities last year, a 45% increase over the year before. But this is not new. This is a consistent wave of activity. It's just getting bigger and bigger. What this says is that people are moving here from wherever they are. They might be in the city, they might be in another part of the country, and they're setting up shop here. This is part of what we do to combat the demographic drought that we shared with you in the luncheon that Liza referred to earlier. Yes, the data is somewhat discouraging about what is happening to our aging and shrinking population. But the way you combat that is you make your place visible and you recruit people to come here based on the strengths of the place. And then you allow that economic activity to essentially flourish the way that it wants to in today's world. What do these people need? I'll remind you again and again, in order for you to set up shop, you need a broadband connection and a house. That's the minimum set in order for this to work. The more of that we create, the more opportunity that we create for this activity to continue. But I got to be honest with you. I was surprised by this. I knew how strong our local economy was. I didn't realize how strong it is. Everyone's trying to do the same things that we are doing, and yet this place continues to outpace. To be fair, I don't believe it's the EDCs. I think we contributed to it, but I don't think we created this. The place creates this. This place wants to continue to attract whatever it is that we want. And if we decide what that is and we become intentional about that, we will continue to buck the trends that all of us are facing. That's the first piece of news I wanted to share with you. I think if we click through, I wanted to share with you an update about broadband. When I took this job 2 years ago under extraordinary circumstances because of the untimely passing of Ed Bartholomew, I had a meeting down the hall here. Kevin Garrity was there. Mike, I think you were there. And I was told very clearly, the county needs somebody to come in and help accelerate and coordinate the broadband activity. And so we we took that on full bore, and you've heard us talk a little bit about where we stand on that process to date. The rest of the state is starting to catch up. So we led a contract with ECC to do an assessment of all of the broadband, both connections and needs in Warren County. We were the first one in this area to do so. Subsequent to that, virtually every county in the North Country has subscribed to this same service from ECC, whether they went and got it directly or they were part of a larger effort. The planning board did an effort and the state has undertaken a similar effort, and ECC is in the middle of it all. What that means is the process that we started became the de facto process for the entire state. That's good from a leadership standpoint, but it also tells you that the data standard that we helped develop is now become the way that this is measured. What I'm showing you up on the screen is the newest information that's now being put up based on the current ECC data from across the state, and it's available to anybody. And we're particularly focused on trying to engage each of you in your leadership roles in the communities that you serve. This allows you to go down to an individual address. So this is an example of an address where you can click on it to determine where is that address and whether it is served or not served. We need your help in making sure that the data that the state is utilizing right now for continued investment is current and correct. So John Wheatley from my office is actually reaching out to every community in Warren County, trying to set up some time for us to meet, whether it's with the supervisor or whoever is the delegate that they would like us to talk to, just so that we can help provide the input to make sure this data is current. Let me be clear about this. Warren County is in such a good position on broadband that we are going to struggle to get state money to continue to invest here, because there are counties that don't have half the penetration that we now have. If we are going to be successful at it, it's going to be because we know our stuff inside and out, and we're effectively advocating for it. And secondarily, because we team with our neighbors who have greater need. Now, what is in it? How do we make that kind of deal? So if I'm another county in New York and I'm looking for help and I've only got 40 or 50% of my addresses with a broadband connection, meanwhile, Warren County has nearly twice that rate. Why would I team with Warren County? Well, because we've got a really good process to engage all of the players in this, the carriers, the state funders, the federal funders, the various groups that work on different dimensions of the problem. We can provide that infrastructure to elements that go beyond Warren County. And the quid pro quo is that we can be a part of their grant request when they go in to seek additional support, and their overt needs we can kind of piggyback on to make sure that the small pockets that we still have remain get also addressed at the same time. I'm sharing with you what our strategy is so you understand why do we spend so much time helping various counties across the North Country. Besides the value of economic growth in, say, Essex County or Franklin County benefiting us because we're one of the municipal centers that healthcare and professional services emanate from. Besides that, their numbers and their need become a tool for us to be able to continue to work on our problem. I would like all of you to take a look at this and meet with us so that we can make sure your data is correct. Go ahead.
So what counties would you have in mind?
Well, the ones that we've worked with most aggressively are directly adjacent neighbors. Hamilton County, Essex County, Washington County, basically the catchment area of the Lake George, Lake Champlain Planning Board. Said that backwards. Sorry, I always do that. I'm a little dyslexic. I think Lake George is more important than Lake Champlain. But regardless, that's the first place that we start. But what's increasingly becoming obvious to us is that the park as an entity is desiring this kind of support. So we're seeing more and more of the communities that make up the center or the western part of the park join into our efforts. So it could be, we've had as many as 17 counties on the weekly calls that we have. But I think the logical extensions are the planning boards area first, the park second, and anyone else we could potentially help maybe third. Did that make sense?
Yes.
So I'm happy to provide you with the direct site that you can go to, but it can be a little mystifying. So I think what might make the most sense is for us to try to sit with either you or whoever your designate is in your community to review this information, make sure it's correct. And then we will continue to bring this to the carriers that we dialogue with weekly to see whether or not we can make progress on those addresses outside of any overt grant or program. And then secondarily, try to make sure that that data is incorporated in future grant requests. I wanted to tell you quickly about some other things that are happening, just so that you're aware before they actually get announced to the public. When the pandemic occurred, we actually picked up the calls that Chairman Wild, you and others were instrumental in developing, that were based around economic recovery and providing information to the business and community at large about resources associated with the pandemic. Those calls morphed into 4 different forums. One was for tourism, one was for broadband, one was for economic recovery in general, and one has eventually been focused on housing. We're realizing now that in what I would consider to be our current chapter, I'm not sure that we're through with the pandemic. I don't even want to toy with that idea, but we're definitely in a different phase of it than we were, say, a year ago. In this current chapter, in order for us to keep everyone engaged, we have to continue to evolve these forums. So we've taken a break for a couple of weeks, and we've told everybody for the rest of July, we're standing down while we reformulate. Not all of these groups will meet weekly going forward. It's been a struggle for people to continue to be there, but they all overwhelmingly voice support for the forums themselves to continue. So we're trying to find the right rhythm, whether it's monthly, biweekly, or situationally for each one of these groups. I think the one that's most important to us right now, that's most timely, is housing. There are so many entities that are working on housing, and what we can provide is a clearinghouse for many of those to meet on a regular basis, communicate with each other, and integrate the various works. I'll give you an example. When we release the study that is going to come from the county, which the EDC is a partner in, that will be one of several studies that are going to be produced in the North Country in the next 6 to 12 months. The planning board is doing its own on surrounding counties, and there are efforts underway in the park to do similar things. Just the idea of being able to have a place where anybody who has data can aggregate it across that group. We could potentially take a similar approach on housing as we did on broadband, looking for bigger money on a regional basis by aggregating our need. I don't know whether we'll do that or not, but I'd like to create the opportunity for it to at least be considered. So that's one of the things that we're doing with the housing forum right away. On the economic recovery standpoint, we used to have a weekly call that rotated between topics. So one week we would talk about retail, another week we would talk about tourism, another week we would talk about services. And it's been very helpful in terms of particularly getting the information out from those sectors as to how they're doing. But we're also realizing that there's a thirst for that information beyond the businesses themselves. And in fact, the reason I brought Mike here is he is the author of what will soon be the annual, or I should say quarterly, economic scorecard that we will present, that will provide insight to all of these sectors. So we will have information on this scorecard that will not only depict employment data, which has traditionally been the center of gravity for these kind of efforts, but we'll integrate that with housing data. We'll integrate that with specific data from different parts of our economic sectors. We'll integrate that with tax and public data. So for instance, we can see as our demographics shift and as people either come or go, whether or not we're seeing a corollary increase in tax base, whether we're seeing an increase in occupancy tax while tourism goes up or down, be able to correlate some of these things together to give you even more information than you have today. That process is the first of its kind that I can find from any EDC. CEG provides a scorecard for the capital region that is almost exclusively based on employment factors. What we'd really like to do is to make this much more robust, to provide as much information as we can about our local economy so that the information is relevant, it's specific to us, and it's timely. So Mike has taken this on as his core project, and we will announce next month the first launch of this, and then you will subsequently see it quarterly. And any of you that have questions as we go through this process, would be happy to share more about that with you as we go. The last thing I wanted to share with you is something that I'm not sure we're all aware of. And if we are, I apologize. If you're well aware of this, I apologize. But I was taken back recently in a meeting that was requested by National Grid. Now, I thought I was following this stuff fairly closely. Big energy user when I ran Just Water. I've had a National Grid account, on a commercial basis for a number of years. And yet even I was surprised by the legislation that is being proposed right now in the state and its impact on businesses. This is all driven by the climate agenda, which we are certainly supportive of. And I think even National Grid is supportive of. But the implications of what is currently being proposed are significant in terms of different forms of energy, how they'll be available, whether or not you'll even be able to utilize them after certain periods of time. As the current legislation is proposed, you will have a hard time buying a natural gas appliance after 2025. After 2030, you will not be able to install one in a home. I don't know if we knew this. The idea of expanding natural gas has always been one that we have advocated for into more and more parts of Warren County. That is absolutely never going to happen under this current legislation. In fact, natural gas is being sunsetted over a period of less than 20 years from our entire economy. I don't think we have really looked at what the impacts are going to be to us. I don't think this is realistic. I really think we need an opportunity to educate ourselves so we can become more effective advocates of a more rational policy going forward. And I don't want to act as a shill for National Grid, but I think in this case, all they're asking for is an audience. They had one with me and I was surprised at not only what was being proposed, but the lack of what I would consider to be public awareness about it. I would encourage you, if you would let me, to allow them to come speak to this forum, just so that they can share with you the specifics in more detail than I can. You can decide what, if any, course the county wants to take, but I definitely think the information is worth your while to hear. I'm not opposed, and I don't think our organization or even our community is opposed to anything that helps in terms of climate activity. But I definitely think we have to measure it against what its costs, its practicalities are, and what its impact is going to be on our economy. Now, I will share one thing with you. We don't have natural gas through most of the county. The limitation of natural gas in other counties actually makes it even more likely that there will be businesses that choose here instead of somewhere else. Because if I could choose to live here versus south of here, and I didn't have natural gas in either place, I'd choose here. But a lot of times people are choosing where they are based on the access to materials like that. So this has implications to us that could be positive as well as negative. I just don't know enough about it yet to even tell you where I think we ought to go. And I really would love for you guys to jump in the boat with us to figure out what to do. That's everything I have for the moment, Chairman. I'm certainly open for questions.
Thank you, Jim. Supervisor Leggett, then McDevitt, and then McGowan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That brings up about advocacy in regards to the climate action plan that's being proposed there. And it is something that's almost coming out of nowhere. We've discussed this on a regional level at the Association of Towns and Villages and a few other places as well, because it does affect all carbon-based fuels, which is a lot of our fuels. So carbon burns so well that what are we going to do? And it just seems as if it is driven without a lot of public input. And it needs to have public input to be a rational policy adopted by the state. Is this something that we should pick up at a county level to look at and make recommendations or comments on that plan? And would this be a committee for that to happen?
I would think it would be for this committee, at least initially.
That
And then maybe
comment
get the whole
period ends
board.
in August.
I'm sorry,
That comment period ends in August on the state legislation. So
August when?
I don't know the exact date in August.
So to that point, National Grid has already entered their comments. In fact, that's how I became aware of it, is they asked me to review their comments the day before they submitted them to the state, which gave me a few hours of notice. But here's the thing. I think this whole process is likely to have a great deal of pushback once people realize that. I think there is so much need for greater, more robust conversation about this that I'm not sure that, even though that was the original plan, I'm not sure that that will stay that way. I think what we need to do is educate ourselves so that whether it's in their process or outside of their process, we can register our appropriate feedback and engage. Because it's going to have an impact not only on the county itself, but on the business community and right down to every single residential user. I don't think most people understand that they won't have natural gas in less than 10 years available to them under what is being proposed. I think that will be surprising to many people.
Supervisor McDevitt?
No, I would encourage the committee and Jim to invite National Grid in. I think it would be informative. This comes as a little bit of a surprise to me, and I do know people that live off Ridge Road that in Queensbury that they would be shocked. Okay, they currently do not have gas, and I think most of these residents would like to have gas. So I would encourage us to go forward with National Grid if possible.
Supervisor McGowan?
Yes, thank you. One of my questions, I have a couple there. If we're gonna be getting rid of natural gas, does that also consider propane?
Yes,
Yes.
it's all
Okay.
carbon-based fuels.
And, okay, so all of carbon-based fuel, and what would we be going to? What?
Electric.
What do you say?
They want the state by,
Wait, did you
by
just say
nine-
electricity?
by
Wait a second, we
1930.
can't even get through a summer
Yeah.
without blackouts now.
Exactly.
I mean, what are they thinking?
No.
But then I read in the article, I read an article in the week the other day, of the deforestation of the Amazon for development and farming in this. I mean, they're taking out so much of our carbon footprint absorptions. Where do they come up with this?
I can't defend it. I only want to advocate that you
Oh,
listen
definitely.
to National
Holy
Grid
mackerel.
share more.
I heard about cars going all electric and I was just worried about all cars, but now if you're talking about natural gas and liquid propane and everything going to electric, fuel oil, I mean, holy mackerel, we're gonna go back to camping. Oh, I was just camping with my cast iron. And I probably won't be able to have a fire either. So I won't be able to burn any wood.
So
Wait, for sure.
when we have a comment period that's going to end, is this something that we need to have for potentially a special meeting for?
I would say we probably should. I mean, I looked at the original draft of the climate action plan. It is, I can't tell you how many hundreds of pages it is.
450 or so.
Yeah, yeah. And basically the bottom line is by 1930, yeah, right, 1930, by 2035, everything in New York will be electric except businesses. And I guess to put that in perspective, that includes vehicles. There's 258 million vehicles in the country right now. 200,000 or 2 million are EVs. And there's already blackouts. There's already limitations on when you can charge. You know, I don't disagree that there needs, but they haven't planned thoroughly for this. The infrastructure is not in place. It's the cart before the horse. So how that's going to affect us, it will. It will affect everybody here. But where that legislation is evolving to, as Jim said, there's been some changes. It was going to be in 2024, you couldn't get a building permit without having a total electric. Now that's kind of been pushed back a little bit, but I still think it's not a well thought out piece of legislation. I think the intent is good. The end result that they want to get to is good. The methodology and the lack of a plan to get there versus just legislating that you can't do certain things is of concern. And, I think the ones to really talk to about this would be Dan Steck and Matt Simpson. They're going to vote on this.
Right.
Where do they stand? And what are their dealings, understanding of where that legislation is going? That's if you want to bring National Grid, that's great, but I think those that are involved with the legislation are the people we really need to talk to also.
Well, my understanding is this was supposed to be just the New York City and the boroughs that weren't allowed to do any new construction. That wasn't all electric,
not-
but I'm
It's
surprised
not
we're taking
clear
it
when
this
you
far.
read the plan exactly what is required and what is not. And I think there's an assumption that it might
Businesses
follow
have some.
the minimum wage where there's some kind of tiered structure, but I don't know that it's ever been defined. Here's what I would suggest to you. You're a part of things like NACO and intercounty. I would encourage you to start immediately engaging with your peers. At no point should you ever not talk to Dan or Matt. They're aware of it, but they're going to vote in the minority on this. So the question is not where they stand, but the question is how to create more mass amongst the organizations that you participate in collectively so that a unified voice can come seeking more clarity in time. And I think in order to articulate that as well as you can, I would encourage you to educate yourself, whether it's personally or I suggest we bring them here on whatever level, whether it's a special meeting or the next meeting, but at least let National Grid go through they've studied this for a year and they've provided pretty exhaustive comments of what they think the impacts will be. I would at least want to hear out what those are proposed to be.
So when I hear about this, I reflect on what we're trying to do with the septic systems and the upgrades to septics and how we don't have enough money to really help make that happen. We have a sewer septic system that we're trying to get in North Creek, and there's some opposition against that because of cost. I don't know how the heck we'd ever make this happen. But what's the privilege of the committee? Special meeting to get this done prior to next month and prior to the comment period? Wayne?
Let me offer a comment. I know, I would encourage everybody to go look at it. NISAC has submitted a comment paper to the state on this. I would encourage everybody to look at that and see what NISAC has proposed and what their concerns are. I was at County Planners Association met last Friday before the board meeting, and NISAC representative was there, and they were talking about the climate bill. And basically, they were just saying that their comments have been submitted. So it'd be interesting. I have not looked at those yet. Yeah, we've got some grants that we're working on. We're kind of taking our time right at the moment. You know, so I've just kind of cursory been following some of this. But I would encourage, as I said, I would encourage involvement, like Jim said, with NISAC.
What it's worth, I'm not sure that your comments are going to be even weightier than the significant organizations that already weighed in. I think you should take the time to educate yourself about the plan and the various positions that groups have taken to determine whether or not there's even more you'd like to advocate for. But I think this is going to be an ongoing dialogue in the state for several years. I don't think it's about what happens in the next 6 weeks. I think it's about what happens in the next 6 years. But we got to get started, I think, on it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I would second the idea of, you know, educating ourselves, and if we are going to get a perspective on it, in addition to National Grid, we should probably invite other stakeholders or people that have formulated opinions on it too. Because I do think, you know, we're going to get some good information from National Grid, but we have to understand they have a vested interest in the, you know, the status quo of what our energy technology is.
I encourage you to get as many perspectives as you can. And I think theirs is certainly one of them you want to get.
So I guess my suggestion would be next month, we try to invite a few representatives, National Grid, NISAC, maybe someone can talk to us about it. That's agreeable to the committee. We'll work on that.
Good idea.
Thank you, Jim. Anything else? Mr. Thomas?
Yeah, workforce problems now. Just get something that you won't have to worry about. Another state.
Amen.
It's not going to be, there won't be any businesses to work at, so. This is, from my conservative point of view, this is actually.
I
So we'll make sure we,
bad news. We had some really good news at the beginning of this. I just want you to remember that too.
Yeah, we will.
It's such a party crash.
any other questions for Jim? Okay. Moving forward, Wayne.
Well, as usual, we're sitting here trying to make up time. So I'll just kind of breeze through this. We have no
Let's not make up time. Let's cover what we need to cover
Well,
this morning.
we have no actual committee actions requested this month, which is good. I did want to give an update. We did on the county's comprehensive plan, RFP was released. We had 2 returned. There are some issues with both of them. We're working with the purchasing office to see if those are correctable deficiencies or whether they're fatal flaws. So we're still looking at that. Next Friday is the deadline for submission under the CFA. We're working on 3 applications, working with Town of Chester on the Gateway project there. With Riverfront Park in North Creek. That is one that we're resubmitting from last year. And we're looking to update the First Wilderness Action Plan for all the communities along the Hudson River. That was last updated in 2012. Things have changed. Operator, is gone. There's a number of different opportunities that are now available there. So we're going to look at secure some grant funding for that. I did want to mention, we did have Gina Martin has joined our staff. She's been working part-time for us, but now she is on full-time. We are blessed to have her. She's a good worker, very, she was telling me this morning, she just loves coming to work. So that's nice to hear. She is predominantly working on the septic program, monitoring those activities on that grant, and with ARPA. ARPA is going to be tracking the recipients and their performance criteria, whether they're meeting the terms of their agreements. That's going to be her main function. Speaking of the septic program, there was funding basically for 36 units along the lake. 18 are complete. 10 were in Queensbury, 4 were in Bolton, 1 in Lake George, and 3 in Hague. So, and a number of the others are in work. That program still has actually a couple years to run, but we would like to try to close it out this year so that it just doesn't linger. I do want to give some kudos to Liza. We met on, there's part of the grant award for Countryside requires contractors that hire new employees to offer preferential treatment basically to helping low and moderate income persons gain job skills. What better person to partner with those businesses than Liza's programs to help make that coordination. So we had a great discussion about that. We're still kind of evolving how that will work, but I think that that'll help us fulfill what's known as our Section 3 requirements of the grants, where you have to make a good faith effort to contact certain economic category individuals for employment. The ongoing saga of the housing study, the draft of that is at the Office of Community Renewal of that RFP. They still have not provided comments back to us. Most of those staff are working from home, so it does give us some difficulty in trying to make some connections at times. And that's really the quick update that I've got. So anybody have any questions?
See anything?
All right.
Thank you, Wayne. No sense rushing through that. This is important, right? We have many more grant. Now I understand that there's many more grant opportunities that just surfaced. Ethan was mentioning to me over the last week or so.
Yeah. Legislation came out on the Restore program and some others that, quite honestly, I think Ethan's looked at some of the stuff on it. I have not. I'm trying to get through our current program. I will say, in all fairness to the office staff, ARPA consumes a lot of our time. And hopefully with Gina now being full-time, we'll be able to transition some of the time that Ethan and I spend on stuff over to Gina. But it, 12.5 million, roughly 12.4 million, that's a lot to monitor, and contracts are just going out on a lot of those. I think We just got one signed today back from one of the recipients. So the programs are starting to actually move and be implemented that are being funded. You know, have they outreach to a certain number of individuals? Have they spent their money where they're supposed to? You know, so all those things we have to monitor as part of the performance criteria of why they receive funding. So that is going to be a challenge. But the last thing I wanted to say is that we have announced, released an announcement for an assistant county planner 2. I just looked at the Upstate Planning Association job page. There's 17 openings in upstate New York that we're competing against. I haven't heard anything yet. It is on the New York Planning Federation job board. It is on the Upstate American Planning Association job board, along with noticed on the county's website and stuff. So we'll have to see what happens.
Thank you, Wayne. Some more comments, Brad?
Yes, thank you. That's the 2 is the new one we
Yes.
just created. Okay, let's keep our fingers crossed here.
Ethan, comment?
There was just a touch on what Wayne mentioned about grant funding opportunities. The Restore program is for transforming brownfield sites in commercial areas or residential areas that are sort of blighting. The state can invest quite a bit of money into those. We have to go through a process of selecting what are the most advantageous, vacant, underutilized properties. So I think that as a county and all as supervisors should be thinking about, hey, what are some really high profile vacancies, blighted properties, brownfields that may or may not have contamination on them. Then the other grant opportunity is they're calling it the mini DRI, Downtown Revitalization Initiative. The city of Glens Falls is the first round DRI winner, in which the city proved that it had the planning in place and the private investment in place, that if the state provided $10 million, it would unleash a lot of revitalization. They recognized that this sort of a project of that scale was not appropriate for a lot of our other communities throughout the county. So now there's another program that's smaller in scale. They provide technical assistance. So the Department of State will work with municipalities to see if they're ready to apply for a smaller pot of money. And it does emphasize like physical improvements, walkability, revitalizing, storefronts that once had businesses and have apartments above it. So I think that is going to be a really key program for us to think about, especially with our up-county communities. Pretty much everything that's not Queensway or Glens Falls may have a good fit there.
Thank you, Jim.
To that point, the state unleashed, ESD unleashed 26 programs, and it's the greatest amount of grants that they've had in recent times. Many of those programs are either new or reformatted. There's only a handful of them that have an end of July timeframe. I think, Wayne intimated to several that he's working on that timeline. But there are many programs that are so new that I don't think anyone really knows what they are. We're all kind of crawling through them together. I do think there is opportunity that we haven't seen in years. So you guys obviously got great people working on this. We're looking at it. I think there's a number of other groups that are looking at it, and we will continue to bring anything that we think is of potential, even if you haven't already raised it, because there's so many new programs we've never seen before.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think it's worth tracking with the Lake Champlain, Lake George Regional Planning Board too. They're doing a lot of work just to stay educated and then doing outreach with communities as well. So any opportunities to not reinvent the wheel and connect our municipalities with their larger efforts would be worthwhile.
Very good. Wayne, I just, before you go, I just wanted to maybe relieve some of your concerns. There will be a request to ARPA tomorrow for anywhere between $4 and $5 million to drop some money to the general fund to address some of the financial issues that we have and are projecting also. So that might free up a little time to get us some more grant money, but go ahead.
On a different note, last Thursday morning, there was a special meeting of the AGFTC Planning Committee, and that was a request from the city of Glens Falls to do an amendment to the TIP for about $800,000 to augment cost overruns. It's not overruns. You know, they had a project that was costed out in 2018. They got their bids back just recently. You know, we all know what's happening with construction costs, materials costs. So, but what that'll do is it'll supplement an award that they already have through AGFTC and provide for pedestrian and bicycle flow bridges over the feeder canal on both Water Street and Murray Street. So that allows for more connectivity in that part of the city and means pedestrians and people who maybe use the feeder canal trail or whatever for commuting to work have more opportunities to jump off and cross over. So I think that was a good, it was a lot of discussion on that at the AGFTC meeting, but it was approved and the mayor was very appreciative of that. But it does let that project move forward and it ties in with another, with a significant local waterfront funded project that they have for Prine's Island. So, you know, I think we're moving forward on some things down there and I'm glad to see that the planning committee approved that request on behalf of the city.
Thank you. Anyone else? Just a brief comment from me. I'd like to thank the committee and those engaged because this is the work we do here is quite strategic. It's longer range. It impacts all our residents in the future. I think it's really important and I do appreciate the thoughtfulness that each of you give to these discussions, as well as the work that the staff is doing and Jim and his team is doing, and Mike. Have you decided for staying or not? Because let me give you a little heads up. If you decided we're leaving, I was going to ask Ryan if we could have the sheriff intervene.
I haven't decided yet. I got another year left of school, so I'm here.
All right,
I'm
well,
here for the
Jim,
meantime.
give me a
I've got
heads up,
another
right?
year.
Give you a heads up. But Mike, thank you again. I can't wait to see what your data is going to show us.
Thank you.
So is there anything else anyone else would like to bring up? Seeing none, Mr. Lehman. Are you there?
Just walked back.
You just walked back.
Hello, yes, I am still here, and we have nothing on YouTube.
Others with comments?
Nothing on YouTube, Chairman Wild.
Thank you. And with that, I guess I'll request a motion to adjourn. Supervisor McDowell and Supervisor Frazier, thank you. We are adjourned.